Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. For those of you joining me for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I'm a mixed media abstract artist from Pennsylvania. So today I've got some different paints here. I've got primary yellow, raw umber, brilliant yellow green from Liquitex. I've got Windsor and Newton Windsor Blue and Payne's Gray, and also Liquitex titanium white. There's going to be a list of all of the items that I've used in my description along with links where applicable. That is an 8 by 10 inch cradled board that I got at Michael's. And I'm using a variety of different tools to make this piece. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen here. I just know that I want to start with these colors. This piece ends up being a lot about the artistic process of decision making and how I, as an intuitive artist, use that to get myself through a piece. Now, when I say intuitive artist, that can mean different things to different artists. But to me, it typically means that I start a piece without too much of an idea in place. Sometimes no idea at all, sometimes just some colors or a shape or a theme, some kind of object that I want to include. This time I just started with a series of colors that I knew I wanted to use and let the piece tell me what the next step should be. Now, sometimes that process is easier than others, and this was one where I found some difficulty. So I thought I would just go ahead and share all of this with you because I think sometimes it can be helpful as an artist to hear about the artistic struggles of another artist, to know that you're not alone when you're trying to make something and it's just not happening for you. Now, I do ultimately like what I ended up with here, but it's very different than I thought it was going to be at several points during this piece. So I'm applying a bunch of color straight to the bare board there. I didn't gesso it or prime it or anything. I kind of like the way the wood grain comes through sometimes, and I think that can add to the texture of the overall piece. But I knew I just wanted to have the darker blue around the outside. I added some of the Payne's Gray and the raw umber to the Windsor Blue to get those darker corners, and then I wanted the lighter, brighter colors on the inside, so I added some of the yellow and the primary yellow and the brilliant yellow green to achieve that, along with a little bit of the titanium white just to really hit some bright spots there. And I'm just using a variety of brushes to do different blending in there, and I keep going there until I get a result that I like. So that's another thing that I mean by intuitive art. I don't necessarily follow a strict technique procedure. I just keep going until I like what I see, and that'll tell me that it's time to move on to the next thing. So you can see here that I go back in and add a little more color to those corners, really trying to push that contrast of the bright against the dark there. I get a lot of questions about this particular brush. It's just a blending brush. I got this one at Michael's. I don't have a link for it, but I can put any of the information that I can get you off of the brush itself in the description for you there. It's just a really great blending brush. It looks like a blush brush, and I know some artists actually use makeup brushes for blending. You can do that. I think probably, though, depending on the type of brush that you're using, makeup brush that you're using, you would run the risk of losing a lot of the brush hairs. But I don't know, maybe not. Okay, so I decided I wanted some text in there. I did that a little bit differently this time. I actually took a couple of book pages and used my printer as a copier and copied them on to some paper, and I'm doing just a transfer there, an inkjet print transfer, which I have a whole video about that. It does not work with every printer, so just, try it out and maybe it'll work with yours and maybe it won't. It does work with mine, so it's something that I use. So I just went ahead and put that down, sprayed it with water, transferred the ink onto my gel plate, laid down some matte gel medium, let it dry, and I've got a nice print of that book page there. That's a good alternative to using an actual book page if you don't want to do that, because then you can just keep using the same one over and over again if you just make more copies. So I'm just trimming off some of that excess tissue paper, which is, I should mention, I printed that on tissue paper. I like to do that a lot because you get a nice transparent background. And I wanted to see the colors that I laid down through this. So I'll be able to achieve that once I get these glued on there with my matte gel medium. I ended up printing up several more sheets of that just so I could have a little bit more all over the board there. Again, I still didn't have any sort of a plan at this point. I just knew that I wanted some text on there, and after fiddling with it for a really long time, sometimes I will catch myself doing that too. If I'm fiddling too long, I have to actually make myself stop and say, okay, just glue something down, because you can react to what you put down. Sometimes it's easier when there's already something there to make the next decision than to start the decision making process, if that makes sense. It's kind of the same idea of a blank white canvas or piece of paper can be really intimidating because there's nothing on it. And I think we all at times have that, well, what if I do the wrong thing feeling? And, you know, just start. That's what I have to force myself to do. Just start. And if you don't like what you put down, then you can visually problem solve as you go along. And there was a lot of that in this piece because I don't know, sometimes it is all right there at the surface and I just feel super creative and I love everything that I do. And then there are days like this and, projects like this where no matter what I do, I am not happy with it and I just have to keep pushing forward. So those kind of pieces are just as important as the ones that turn out the way you want, because I find for myself that I tend to learn more by making those, and I'll call them mistakes. They're not really, it's just a learning opportunity. I learn more by coming up with those visual solutions to the visual problems. And that's something that I can carry with me through future works when I've got that in my back pocket in my artist's tool bag, and I can draw on those in the future. I think it was about right here in this piece where I'm thinking, okay, I really liked that background that I had down. Did I just ruin that? And, you have to also not allow yourself to think like that because nothing's ruined. I mean, it's paper and paint, and anything can be redone, painted over. I mean, even collage can be soaked off, and you can, like, I'm using a board here. I have done that before. I've done a collage, absolutely hated it, and just soaked the paper off, sanded everything down, and reused it. So the only thing you're really, and I hate to even say wasted because that sounds like such a negative word, but the only thing you're really spending here is your time. You're not wasting anything because everything can be a learning process. But this was later in the evening, right before I was going to go to bed, but I was feeling pressure from myself to get something down on this board because I needed to, you know, get a piece done and put out a video. And then I thought, okay, I need to just stop because I am unhappy with it. Let's go to bed, wake up, and look at it in the morning. So that's what I did. This here is the next morning, and that is some Artist Loft modeling paste and an offset spatula. And I decided that I wanted to introduce some not just visual texture, but literal texture on there with my modeling paste. So I'm just applying it, and I tend to always use the same pattern. I like a heavy visual weight down at the lower left-hand corner, but I do like it to carry up around and sort of frame the piece. I still, as I'm putting this on, have no idea what I'm going to do, but I saw this stencil laying to the side there, and if I can find a link for that, I'll put it in the description for you. And I press it into the modeling paste to get those little flowers on there. Now, I had tried making a gel print with that stencil because originally I was just going to see about maybe putting some of those on there, but nothing was really looking right. Nothing was speaking to me, if you know what I mean. So this was another one of those situations when I was like, okay, you just do something. Just put something down there and then you can react to it and go from there. And I actually really liked the way that looked. I know that if you've seen me in any of my videos before, I use floral motifs a lot. So this was not out of my my comfort zone as far as going with my typical style. So once I left all of that modeling paste dry, I needed to get the harsh whiteness down. So I added some of the Windsor Blue that I used into the background. Now, granted, most of what you can see from the background is actually that brilliant yellow-green and primary yellow coming through, so it doesn't look like it's exactly the same, but that is a color that I used in the base, if you can remember that. I am using some Indigo acrylic ink there, and I will have all of these items listed for you. And spraying. When I use acrylic ink on texture, I like to get everything pretty wet first and then let it really just flow. You can see there how it's flowing and using its own liquid movement along with the water that I added, and it creates these really interesting tendrils coming down. And it was at this point where I was like, okay, maybe I can salvage this and, start to like it a little bit more. Although I still had really no idea what the next step was going to be. So I just kept going with the ink. I'm using a combination of Indigo and Payne's Gray ink on there to get some dimension, and really it's sinking into the areas around the stencil and really letting you see those flowers a little better. I'm not sure I'm loving everything that's going on in the middle there with all of the drips. I don't typically love drips in my work. Sometimes they're okay. That was the one part that I wasn't sure, and I was starting to think that it looked very dark. So I had just ordered this ultra fine tip Posca pen, which if you've never used these, it's an acrylic paint marker. And I got that off of Amazon. I'll have a link for you down there for that as well. It's a very, very fine tip, which I liked. And I decided to do some really sketchy flowers. And I did these in one or two other videos. I can link those at the end for you if you're interested in seeing. I just really wanted something to lighten up against all of that dark background. And there's a lot going on back there with all of the drip marks, and there's the text, and you can see the color underneath. We've got the texture from the stencils and the modeling paste with the other flowers, but I just needed something in the middle there to brighten everything up. So I decided then, after that was done, that the edges needed to be a little bit darker for me. I wasn't really happy with the way that had lightened up because I put a lot of water in that, so when it dried it did lighten up a good bit. So I wanted to really push that darkness around those corners and really make it a little bit more of a frame around those white sketched flowers that I had just put in. So at this point, I like where it's going, but then I ended up going a little too far with it, for at least for my opinion, and I decided to drip some of that ink down over the flowers, and I didn't love that because it sort of undid all of that contrast that I had just gotten on there with the white acrylic marker. There's just too much going on in the background for that to make sense. You can see there, like the flowers basically just completely got lost. So I dab off some of the ink that I had put on there and moved it around a little bit more, but just still really wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. I continued darkening around the outside, and I let some of that ink move up into the flowers again, but you can even see the hesitation in my hand there. I'm just like, I just kind of don't know what to do here. And not long after this, I stopped for the day because I was kind of at that point where I needed to step back from it and gain a little bit of perspective. So this morning when I woke up, I decided I am going to take those flower stems off of the page there because that I thought was going to help break that up a little bit. And then I went over with the white pen again and covered over a lot of what I had put on as far as those drips, just to make those flowers stand out. But still the whole piece was looking too dark. So I got some of that brilliant yellow green and I got my brayer. And what I was hoping to achieve and did was just to hit those high points on that stencil so that those flowers could really pop. I have the darkness around there, but I'm also getting some highlights on the tops of those, of where the modeling paste is, and it makes the flowers stand out without lightening up the whole piece too much. So I'm still getting good contrast. And I also decided at that point that I might want to line the whole piece with some of that brilliant yellow green. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I typically do this with black. I have a nice matte black paint that I usually edge the entire piece with and bring it up and carry it into the piece. But because everything was so dark, if I did that, it wasn't going to be as impactful as it was on some of my other lighter pieces. So I just kept using more and more of this brilliant green yellow, or yellow green. I keep saying both of them. I can't remember which one it is. I'll have it written in the description for you. But I go in with various tools. I start with the brayer, and then I just went in with a brush there and shaded a little bit with it. I like the corners to be a little bit shaded. I carried it around down all of the sides there, and it really brightens everything up, and I think it brought it to life a little bit more. And I'm doing all of this also, I should say, with a dry brush, because I don't want a lot of the paint to get down into the nooks and crannies of the texture paste from the stencils there. I just want it to hit the tops so that you can see them, so that everything stays nice and bright, and it just wakes everything up a little bit and breathes some new life into it. So I'm definitely starting to like it a lot better at this point, but the one thing that's bugging me about it now is the whiteness of the flowers, because they kind of don't make sense. There's no other white in it, and they sort of just look like they're sitting there. So I just took that same dry brush and went over the white with a little bit of that paint. I didn't add any water to it or anything. And because I'm using very little paint and a dry brush, it's allowing me to create like a misty kind of ethereal sort of quality to the flowers. And I think it really brought everything kind of to a point where I was much happier with it. Here it is all finished up. I went ahead and painted the sides, and like I said before, I typically do that in black, but I used that same yellow-green color just to carry it down and carry that brightness over the edges. And I also sprayed that with a coat of my spray that I typically use to finish, which is Krylon Triple Thick Crystal Clear Glaze. I will have a link for that in the description for you as well. And all in all, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Even if it's not my favorite piece, I learned a lot from it. And one of the most important things you can learn from a piece like this is just keep going, and you'll work your way through it. If you're not on a time limit, you can let these sit for weeks or however long you want, until someday you're going to look at it again and go, oh, I know exactly what that needs to fix it up. Or maybe you will end up deciding, okay, this one was, not the best and I'm going to redo it. But at any rate, you take something away from each piece that you do. And that's really all I wanted to kind of hit on in this video today. So thank you for listening to my ramblings, and thank you as always for joining me in this process. If you liked my video, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that button. I put out a new video every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Take care and have a great day.